you both sort of referred to sort of the tension sometimes between growing opportunistically and then being more deliberate. So just flesh that out a little bit in terms of sort of what is the impetus for growth for you, and sort of pluses and minuses of the opportunism versus the deliberateness. And then for folks who are looking whether to bring good organizations or to actively help existing organizations, what do you look for in terms of scalability, sort of a little bit of the criteria, and maybe in that, if you could answer the question of what scale means to you guys. But first.
I just think about it broadly beyond, I think the traditional definition of scale is replicate your current motto and go to new site, either scale up your existing site and serve more customers, or enter new sites and take your motto and export it to other places and do the same thing. And I think a lot of us today are beginning to think about how can we think about scale more broadly, because even if we got 100 times as big, we went from 4,000 dreamers to 40,000 or 400,000, we're still going to be not solving the fundamental root issues and transforming, being a game changer. We're still going to be just limited to direct service. There'll be secondary good impacts, but at the end of the day, it's still a Band-Aid. And so I think a lot of us are now thinking about, as we think about scale because we want to grow our impact, but there are other ways to grow your impact. So leverage, how can we indirectly impact millions more students than we can directly ever serve? And that I know Mike has been, clearly he talked about technology and being able to leverage that, going through existing distribution channels. There are many programs that already have existing infrastructure that aren't under the I Have a Dream name. How can we take our product and make it portable and standardized so that they can actually use it? For me, opportunistic typically means, you're chasing, your opportunities come up, you're not planning it ahead of time. So for example, there might be a funder, you're chasing the dollars. There might be a funder who wants to do I Have a Dream in some random town in the US, and we don't even think about it. We say, of course, why would we not open a new site?
Your dream is my dream.
Yeah.
Give me the money.
or it could be, and it could just, and it doesn't have to be a money thing either. It's just we're saying, oh, well, there are a couple factors there that, that they want to have us, let's just go. Now, when I think about strategically, the key question becomes, in what part, if we're thinking about geographical scaling of the conventional definition, of what parts of the country can we have the greatest impact over time? And when you think about it that way, you have to find a site where you have to really understand what ingredients need to be put into place, what factors are necessary to have a sustainable operation, and you need to understand how big can you grow it. And that's not a static answer, by the way. I mean, it's a dynamic. You can even impact it. I mean, you have control in some ways over how much demand there is for your service, for example. So I just think thinking about thoughtfully and then thinking about what does it take to actually execute on that growth. And then really being honest with ourselves that not only are there limited resources of time and money, but there's a hidden cost. So you might think, well, the money's there and they're going to do all the work. But honestly, if we want to keep our brand or our quality or something intact that's important to us, organization, for our mission, it's going to have these hidden costs of even just management time. It's just one example. So that's how I think about the difference.
Yeah, I would echo, well, a guiding light for us when we think about this kind of stuff is it's sort of our responsibility to get our program, which we think is great, to as many people as we can while maintaining or increasing quality in any given year. But that, as maintaining quality is so broadly defined, it means everything from maintaining the program quality that we all know about, think about, to how much can the staff or the organizational dynamics handle, how much can you financially handle, and never have to go back is another big concern for us. So like, we never would want to decrease the number of people we're serving in a year. We'd never want to cut. That's another huge piece of it. But I also would echo what Iris is saying about scale not just being increase in numbers. And so when we think about these things, we also think about how are we increasing our impact, and that's really and how we're maximizing that impact. So another thing we're doing in addition to, 4 years ago, all of our mentor-mentee matches were 1 school year in length. Now 70% of them are multi-year in length. And so we're going to continue to scale that up. We have been lucky in the sense that we have yet to meet demand restraints. So we've had a waiting list of mentors in schools every year. And so that allows us in some respects to sort of define our pace as we grow. But I think in terms of all the things that you can do programmatically, it's also all of this. Even if we could do 4,000 pairs next year, like get 4,000 students enrolled and 4,000 mentors sign up, we couldn't organizationally do 4,000 pairs well, and I think that's a big part of what we think about.
I think the comment I would make is to be very careful of focus and illusion, that maybe TFA and iMentor have the characteristics which I'll describe, but growing nonprofits is very, very hard. And I think there's an argument out there that people have, look at what's happened in the business community, look at the growth, look at Google, it's crazy, there's 1 million nonprofits, they're growing so fast that the average nonprofit is smaller than it was 10 years ago. I think that's true, and this is crazy. And if you just say stop, it's most nonprofits are people intensive. So if you're going to grow them, you're going to need more people. Almost all nonprofits don't really have the ability to capture and monetize intellectual property, right? Most nonprofits can't really borrow money. Most of them can't do acquisitions or joint ventures. I mean, if you sort of looked at the for-profit analogy to most nonprofits, very, very people-intensive businesses that have to be physically in the places where they're doing the work, it's just really hard. And then you add to that the fact that even Teach for America as a for-profit is tiny, and most nonprofits are fragile in their financing. I think the presumption needs to be that most nonprofits shouldn't grow at all, and you really need to be careful and think what's the benefit and what's the risk. And at least within SeaChange, we try to separate, and you can't separate them completely, the program, the organization, and the funding. Because if you're going to grow, the last thing you want is to grow your organization but have the program go from something that worked that didn't work. And it's hard enough to know if a program's really working. To know that to continue to know that it's working as you grow is hard. And I think there's a whole bunch of questions about what does scale do for your program. I think in Teach for America it does obvious things, and it sounds like in iMentor it does as well. Then there's the organization side. I mean, just growing an organization by even 20% a year, just the human resource challenge of recruiting and all that kind of stuff is a tremendous strain. And then you have funding issues around, okay, let's make sure that this growth capital isn't a steroid that pumps us up and then, as you say, then leaves us worse than we would have been if we'd never taken it. So, at least from our perspective, the good news is we're not trying to do that many things. And therefore, for us, we're sure we can find the organizations that have the capacity and the opportunity to significantly increase their impact, which is how we think about it. But that's a small, small fraction, in my view, of what's out there. And if your number one principle should be do no harm, right? Be careful, because you can try to grow these things, and seems to me you can fail three ways. One is you can just fail to grow them, like we tried to grow and we didn't grow because we didn't get the money. Or you can grow them and have it be a catastrophe because they grow and then they shrink. But then I think there's the silent failures where you took a program that worked in 3 sites and you grew it to 6 sites, but by the way, it doesn't work in any of those 6 sites anymore because in search of growth you hollowed it out in some way, and that's very hard to see. So I just think we all need to be careful that this is really the exception, not the rule, at least in service organizations.